The new game. "What shall we do today?" said Ginger. There was in his voice a certain touching confidence in fate as a never-failing provider of thrills. They looked at William. William was generally fate's instrument in the providing of thrills. "I think," said William, with a rather self-conscious nonchalance, as if only pretending, of course, to be unaware of the originality of his suggestion. "I think we'll try greyhound racing for a change." "Greyhound racing?" replied the outlaws in surprise. They had expected William to say pirates, or Red Indians, or perhaps smugglers, but greyhound racing was so novel, so unexpected, so daring and up-to-date, that they could only repeat the words and stare at William helplessly. "Yes," said William, still with his exaggerated nonchalance. I heard Robert and some other people talking about it last night. It seemed sort of simple. It seemed just the sort of thing we could do." It was Douglas who voiced the first objection. "But we haven't got any greyhounds." "We've got Jumble," said William with spirit. Jumble was William's dog, though some people thought that dog was too definite a term for Jumble. Ginger laid his finger at once upon the weak spot in William's argument. "Jumble isn't a greyhound," he said. William looked at him coldly. "No one's ever found out exactly what sort of a dog Jumble is," he said distantly, "and I bet he's as likely to be a greyhound as anything." The outlaws forbore to touch further upon the delicate subject. William was apt to resent as an outrage upon his personal honour any reflections upon Jumble's pedigree. They turned hastily to another aspect of the matter. "There can't be racing with only one dog," objected Henry. "Oh, we can easily find another dog," said William carelessly. "The country's simply overrun with dogs. I heard my father say so yesterday. One had just bit him." "And how do you make 'em race?" demanded Ginger. "Seems to me they'd only start playing or fighting. Dogs don't race naturally." "They have a mechanical hair for 'em," said William kindly, and with a superior air of knowledge, "that makes 'em race." "Well, we haven't got a mechanical hair," said Ginger, as if that settled the matter. "No," retorted William, as if it didn't, "but I've got a clockwork mouse, and that's just the same." They were nonplussed for a minute, and then, as usually happened, they became infected with William's optimism. "Well," said Ginger, "it ought to be all right. It'll just be fun anyway." Preparations for the race began at once, and it seemed likely to grow into quite an elaborate affair. "Let's have refreshments," said William, "and betting and all." "Betting's wrong," objected Henry piously. "Only when it's horses," said William hastily. "It's all right when it's greyhounds." "Besides," said Ginger, as if exculpating them still further in the matter, "Jumble's not exactly a greyhound either, so it's probably quite all right." The first difficulty was to find a race track. They finally decided on an open space in the wood near William's home. "We'll let 'em out at this tree," said William with a businesslike air, "and let 'em run to that tree. That'll be the winning post, and Ginger'll stand there with a notebook, putting down which comes first." "Suppose they catch the mouse before they get to the tree," objected Ginger. "The hare," said William coldly. "They never do that, I don't think. Anyway," optimistically, "we won't let 'em do that. And Henry'll see to the betting." "I don't know how to," said Henry. "I've never done it. How do you do it?" Henry's helplessness and lack of initiative seemed to irritate William. "It's quite easy," he said. You sort of stand with a notebook and say, 'Bet you a penny Jumble wins,' or 'Bet you a penny the other one wins,' to everyone. And if they take it on, put down their names in the notebook." "And if Jumble wins, the ones that said he wouldn't give me a penny?" "Yes." "And if he doesn't, I give them a penny?" "I suppose so." "Where do I get it from?" "You get it from the pennies that the people who don't win the bets give you." Henry considered this for some minutes in silence and said, "Let Douglas do that part and I do something else." "All right," said William coldly. "It's ever so easy, Douglas." "And who'll come to the race?" demanded Ginger. "Anyone," said William, "but they'll have to pay money to come in." "No one will pay money if they have to pay money to come," said Ginger, with simple conviction. William could not help admitting the truth of this. "Then we'll just invite the people we like and not let any of the others come," said William. "Not Hubert Lane, nor any of the rest of them," said Ginger. The outlaws carried that by acclamation. Between the outlaws and the Hubert Laneites had existed, since any of them had remembered, a deadly feud, which sometimes merely smouldered and sometimes burst into open warfare. "Crumbs, no," said William. "None of them." A smile of satisfaction broke over his face. "But we'll let 'em know we're having it. They'll be mad at not being able to come." Preparations continued during the next few days. To tell the truth, the outlaws concentrated most of their attention upon the refreshments. They did many small services at home, consisting mostly of sawing wood on a strictly cash basis. They sold sundry of their less precious possessions to their friends. They affected suddenly perfect manners when in the neighbourhood of elderly and prosperous relatives. The net result was 1 and 11 farthing. The farthing had been found by Henry in his coal shed. The outlaws were delighted by it. With it they provided a magnificent feast, 8 bottles of licorice water, 2 bottles of ginger ale, and an array of the cheapest and most indigestible cakes that the outlaws, after a long and patient search, which drove several confectioners to the verge of madness, could find. The next thing to do was to find a second greyhound to race with Jumble. William still seemed inclined to think that Jumble alone would do. He liked to think of cheering Jumble as victor past the winning post, and with a second competitor, there was always the chance that Jumble might not arrive as victor at the winning post. But he admitted the logic of the argument that with only one greyhound, it could not strictly be called a race. With Ginger he roamed the fields and roads in search of stray dogs and found none. It was amazing, as he frequently remarked, where all the stray dogs had got to just now. Why, ordinary days they were all over the place. They must be hiding away somewhere. Extraordinary, he said, how animals seemed sometimes almost human in the way they do things just to spite you. The day of the race arrived, and still no rival to Jumble had been found. William had laboriously written out a notice. "Greyhound racing, got up by Mr. William Brown. Anyone may bring dogs to run against Jumble, the great racing greyhound belonging to Mr. William Brown." He had meant to pin it onto his side gate, but the other outlaws, though admiring it as a literary production, pointed out that its public appearance would only give an opportunity to the Hubert Laneites to turn up at the race. Suppose Hubert himself arrived with his mother's pom? It was a horrible idea. William promptly destroyed his notice and went out again to look for a stray dog. He came upon a young pig that seemed to have wandered from its native haunts, gazed at it doubtfully, decided that by no stretch of imagination could it be referred to as a greyhound, nor by any human means could it be made to resemble a greyhound, and returned to the outlaws again empty-handed. However, he was in an optimistic mood. "We'll probably find something on the way," he said. They had decided to have the refreshments in a small clearing, a very short distance from the racecourse, and thither they bore the provisions, packed precariously in school satchels, about half an hour before the race was timed to begin. Jumble accompanied them, leaping exuberantly and running on in front, little dreaming that he was a greyhound and about to take part in a race. Had he known it, his deportment would have been sadly altered. Jumble disliked on principle all the varied roles that his master thrust upon him. The only time he had ever bitten William was once when he was impersonating a Viking in a play written by William. He found the stage directions confusing and ran amok. Ginger had his little notebook for writing down the winner's name and a piece of string to tie to the winning post. Douglas carried his betting notebook and looked rather gloomy. The more he thought over the system of greyhound betting as expounded by William, the more gloomy he became. "Suppose they all bet right and want pennies, and none of 'em bet wrong and give me pennies," he said. "What happens then?" But the others, feeling that he was trying to make out his part in the proceedings to be unduly important, only said, "Oh, shut up." William had the clockwork mouse in his pocket. He was frowning abstractedly, his thoughts still taken up with Jumble's as yet undiscovered rival. "We may find one lost in the wood, just where we're going to have the race," he said. "Look," said Ginger suddenly. They were passing the back gate of a house. It was open. On it was inscribed, "Beware of the dog." And just inside it was a kennel, and chained to the kennel was a very friendly-looking fox terrier, who wagged his tail when he saw that the outlaws had stopped to look at him. "I know him," said Ginger importantly. "I'm a friend of his. I've often gone in to play with him there when no one was about." There was silence. The outlaws stood gazing at the dog and then at each other, while the great idea took shape. Ginger at last broke the silence and voiced it. "I votes we just borrow him for the race. I think they're all out. We can have him back again before they come back." Without waiting for their answer, Ginger went up to the dog and unchained it. He joined the party with jubilation, leaping down the road with them and fraternising exultantly with his fellow greyhound. They had finished all their preparations. The feast was spread out in the space reserved for refreshments. The outlaws had determined to charge their patrons a penny per head, and then let them fight for whatever they could get. The patrons were now beginning to arrive. Douglas, with his little notebook, was doing brisk business. He had reduced the ceremonial of betting to its simplest form possible. He had written on one page of his little notebook, "For Jumble," and on the opposite page, "Against Jumble." The news spread like wildfire among the patrons of the race. "If you go up to Douglas and say, 'I bet you a penny Jumble doesn't win,' they'll give you a penny if he doesn't." The patrons all did this. It was not that they did not admire Jumble, but a stranger at first sight often commands more respect than someone we have known all our lives, and there was something vaguely sporting-looking about the fox terrier. "I expect it's a real racing dog they've got in," murmured one of the patrons with awe. William caught the competitors and tied them to the starting tree, and then, looking very important, blew a blast on his whistle. Henry cleared the track. William wound up his clockwork mouse. "1 to be ready, 2 to be steady," shouted William, "and 3! He blew another blast on his whistle. He released the clockwork mouse. Henry unleashed the greyhounds. The clockwork mouse went forward 2 inches, then came to a slight irregularity in the ground and stopped. The greyhounds danced off playfully into the wood in the opposite direction, ignoring track and patrons and mechanical hare alike. The patrons began to grumble. This wasn't what they'd come to see. "We'll have another try," said William in his most official manner. They had another try. The 2 greyhounds were recalled to the starting tree, were shown the clockwork mouse, and told once more what was demanded of them. Both of them wagged their tails in cheerful understanding and compliance. Again, Henry cleared the track. Again, William wound up his clockwork mouse and blew his whistle. But something had gone wrong with the clockwork mouse, and it now refused to function at all. The fox terrier leapt upon it, seized it by the tail, flung it into the air, fell upon it again, chewed it up, and then scampered off in the opposite direction after his new friend. "What do they do at the real races when they carry on like this?" demanded Ginger in a frenzied aside to William. "I don't know," said William irritably. "They don't carry on like this. It's the dog's fault. They don't seem to know what racing means." "It was your idea," said Ginger bitterly. The patrons were crowding round Douglas, insisting that Jumble had lost whatever race there was, and demanding their pennies. Certainly it was not Jumble who had caught the mechanical hare. A hunted look was coming over Douglas's face. "I can't help it," he was saying. "I haven't got any." "Well, it's your own faults. You shouldn't have all betted on the same dog. If half of you had betted on one and half on the other, then I'd have had money to give half of you from the other half. I don't care, it's not my fault. I can't help you. I tell you, I haven't got any." "You promised us a penny if he won," growled the patrons. "Well, he didn't win. Neither of them won." "He did win. He got hold of the mouse, anyway, and that's winning." "We want our pennies." "You promised us our pennies." They grew more and more turbulent, till finally Douglas, like so many others of his profession before and since, took to his heels, pursued by an indignant crowd. William stood looking down at the ruins of his mechanical hare. The greyhounds still sported joyously about in and out of the trees. "Well," said William disgustedly, "it's all been a rotten sort of show, hasn't it?" It was all your idea, Ginger reminded him once more. Yes, and it was a jolly good idea, said William indignantly. Fancy blaming me, because these two dogs haven't any sense. Where's Douglas? He's running away, explained Henry morosely. They're all after him for their pennies. He turned to William. That's your fault too. I don't believe you know anything about betting. It's them what don't know anything about betting, said William, defending himself spiritedly. Fancy them all betting on the same dog. Stands to reason there's no money for 'em if they all bet on the same dog. Well, anyway, let's go and eat up the food. They went slowly through the trees to the place where they'd left the refreshments. It was empty of refreshments. Every cake, every bottle had disappeared. In their place was a piece of paper bearing the words, Thank you very much from all of us for a good tea, signed Hubert Lane. Hope it poisons 'em, said Henry viciously. But William's blood was up. It was a relief to be able to concentrate his bitterness upon a concrete enemy. Come on, he said tersely. Let's catch 'em up. Probably they're still somewhere in the wood. But they weren't. William, Ginger and Henry, lusting for the Hubert Laneites' blood, scoured the wood from end to end, and even searched all the roads leading to Hubert Lane's house. There was no trace of the Hubert Laneites, but from an upper window in Hubert Lane's house they were rewarded by the sight of Hubert Lane making triumphant, jeering grimaces at them, and licking his lips suggestively. They pretended not to see him, and returned morosely to the racecourse. Fancy that happening on top of everything else, said William, just as if it wasn't enough for the whole race to go wrong like that. It seemed to the outlaws that sometimes fate lacked artistic restraint in her effects. There were no traces of the greyhounds on the racecourse, but Douglas was there. He had managed to elude his pursuers, and was breathless and indignant. No wonder you wanted me to do the betting part, he said bitterly. I don't wonder you shoved it all off onto me. I'm just about wore out with it all. I can't think what people see in betting. When he heard of the latest catastrophe, his gloom changed to consternation. Gosh, he said, aghast, just to think of it. Me wearing myself out sawing wood and earning money for him, for that Hubert Lane. Let's go home anyway, said William. I've had enough of it all. If only he'd done a bit of sawing for it, but getting it all for nothing like that, stealing it. There's that dog, said Ginger suddenly. That dog we borrowed. We'd better be taking him back. At that moment, Jumble and a fox terrier came leaping through the trees. William seized the fox terrier and inserted a grimy handkerchief through its collar. Douglas looked at him with distaste. Can't think what they wanted, all betting on him, he said. Come on, said William impatiently. They went out of the wood and down the road to the house from which they'd taken the dog. Ginger kept looking at the dog thoughtfully. They crept in by the back gate, which was still open, and fastened the dog to the chain. Then they came out and hurried down the road. Ginger was still very thoughtful. Where are we going now? Said Douglas. Back to the wood, said William. I've left the bits of the mouse there. I bet I could mend it all right. And I bet if we trained Jumble a bit, he'd be able to race after it all right. It was only that he didn't quite understand. William's optimism was boundless. William, said Ginger very slowly and thoughtfully, I don't think that was the right dog. What was the right dog? Said William impatiently. The dog we took back wasn't the same dog as the dog we took. It looked just the same, said William. It didn't look quite the same, said Ginger. I mean, it was the same make of dog, all right, a fox terrier, but it wasn't exactly the same dog. I'm almost sure it wasn't. You see, he explained simply, I'm one of its friends. I know it. William was aghast. Crumbs, he said helplessly. Well, it'll have to stay there now. If it's not the right one, I can't help it. The man it belongs to will have to find the right one. I've just about had enough of today. They reached the racecourse once more. Jumble darted off again among the trees, and William collected the bits of clockwork mouse and began to try to put them together again. You'll never do it, said Ginger gloomily. There's sixpence gone, and all the money we spent on the refreshments, and all the money we might have got through the betting if Jumble had sense. Greyhound racing, he exploded sarcastically. He ought to have been a monkey on a barrel organ, for all the sense he's got. Fancy a dog not having enough sense to race with another dog and run after a mouse. I'd be ashamed of having a dog that hadn't enough sense for that." William, stung to the quick by this attack on his pet, rose to his defence indignantly. "Oh, you would you? Well, let me tell you that Jumble couldn't race because he's got too much sense for it. That's what it is. He's too intelligent to make a racing dog. That's what it is, too intelligent. Racing dogs are all stupid. They've got to be stupid that they think a clockwork hare's a real hare to run after it. Well, Jumble's too intelligent for that. He knew it wasn't a real one, and that's why he wouldn't race after it, 'cause he's too intelligent." He appealed to Douglas for support. "Don't you think so, Douglas?" he said. But Douglas refused to be drawn from his own particular grievance. "I don't wonder lots of people are against betting," he said. "It seems to me all wrong. I shall always be against it myself now." At that minute, a diversion was caused by Jumble, who reappeared through the trees, frisking about with another fox terrier. "That's the real one!" exclaimed Ginger. It greeted Ginger ecstatically, and the others with jubilant friendliness. It was certainly the real one. All of them recognised it. "We've got to take it back," said Ginger righteously. "We borrowed it, and we've got to take it back. We can't leave it loose all over the wood." "All right," agreed William dispiritedly. "Come on." He secured this fox terrier too with his handkerchief, and accompanied by Jumble, they set off again for the fox terrier's home. At the back gate of the fox terrier's home, however, they stopped dead. The gate was still open, but the yard was no longer empty of humans. There were 2 men in it. Both were angry. Both were pointing with indignant gestures at the fox terrier, which the outlaws had lately brought there, and which was still chained to the kennel, watching proceedings with interest. One man was evidently its master, and was accusing the other of stealing it. The other was indignantly denying the accusation, and bringing a countercharge of theft against his visitor. "You've stolen it! Of course you've stolen it! Why do I find it chained up like this in your backyard if you haven't stolen it? I shall tell the police." "Stolen the thing? I've never seen it before. I tell you, when I went out this afternoon, my own dog was chained up there. What I want to know is how it comes that my dog's gone and this wretched cur's in its place." "Wretched cur, indeed! You thought enough of it to steal it. I never stole it. My own dog—" "I don't believe you ever had a dog. Liar." "What do you call me?" "Liar. Dog thief." "Dog thief? I'll call up the police this instant." "Do, and I'll give you in charge." "Yes, and I demand my dog of you. What have you done with it?" "Stolen a valuable pedigree dog and put a miserable mongrel in its place." "Liar! Thief! Thief yourself! Liar yourself! I'll call—" At that moment they turned and saw the outlaws standing, a helpless, fascinated group. William was still holding the original fox terrier by its collar. "There's my dog!" yelled the terrier's owner. The terrier leapt upon him in ecstatic recognition. He was a dog with a very large heart. The spell that had till now held the outlaws paralysed ceased to hold them, and they fled down the road. They were pursued by angry shouts from the 2 men. From the shouts the outlaws gathered that they had recognised William and were going to tell his father. "Crumbs!" panted William when they stopped at the end of the road to draw breath. "Crumbs! What a day!" "Well," said William's father the next morning, "I really don't want to hear any more about it. I'm sick of hearing about that dog. I don't know why on earth you go about the countryside borrowing dogs. You've got one of your own, haven't you?" "Yes, but you can't have races with only one dog," protested William earnestly. "But why have races? The trouble with you, my boy, is that you're suffering from a superabundance of spirits and leisure time. There are a few logs in the woodshed. You can saw them all up into small pieces today. It will occupy your time and reduce your superfluous vitality." "Me!" gasped William, pale with dismay. "Me! Alone!" "You may get your friends to help you," said his father pleasantly. "Even so, it will, I think, take you most of the day." William joined his friends and communicated the news. "Just when we were going to go fishing," he said despondently. After yesterday's fiasco, the outdoors had decided upon fishing as a safe and pleasant pastime that couldn't go wrong. "What makes me so mad," said Ginger, "is the thought of that old Hubert Lane and the others eating up all those things we bought, and that we sawed and sawed, and now we've got to saw again. Of course we'll come and help you, William, and I wouldn't mind so much if we could make him do a bit of the sawing." A thoughtful expression had come over William's face. "Let's go down by his house," he said, "and see if we can meet him." By one of the strokes of good luck that occasionally befell the outlaws, they did meet him. They met him in the lane leading to his house. At first sight he took them for a punitive expedition, and his face paled with apprehension. But nothing could have exceeded the friendliness with which William accosted him. "Hello, Hubert. How are you?" Hubert, still looking a little apprehensive, said that he was very well. The outlaws began to walk down the lane with him. "I say, that was a jolly good trick you played on us yesterday," said William. "As a matter of fact," he continued shamelessly, "we were jolly glad to see those things gone. We'd just been wondering what we were going to do with them. There were just a few old bad ones left over from our tea. We'd eaten all the nice ones, and we'd had all the ginger ale we could drink, and we were just wondering what to do with those few old bad cakes and ginger ale left over when we found you'd taken 'em. I can tell you we were jolly glad. We didn't want to leave 'em about in the wood, because of making the place untidy, and we didn't want to take 'em home, because of none of us liking 'em, so we were jolly glad, I can tell you, to find 'em gone." Hubert's mouth had dropped open with dismay and disappointment. Hubert was very credulous. "Oh," was all he could say. "Yes, what are you going to do today, Hubert?" went on William pleasantly. "I don't know," said Hubert cautiously. "We're going to have a lovely time," said William enthusiastically. "We've got to go out this morning, but this afternoon we're going to have a lovely time." "What are you going to do?" inquired Hubert with interest. "Saw up wood," said William, with a world of pleasurable anticipation in his voice. "We've been trying to get some logs to saw up into small pieces for ever so long now. At last we've got some. They're in our woodshed. We'd rather saw wood than anything else, wouldn't we?" he appealed to the outlaws. The outlaws said that they would. "We'd rather do it than play Red Indians, or anything," went on William. "We're jolly well looking forward to this afternoon when we're going to saw those logs. We've got to be out all this morning, but we shall be thinking all the time of those lovely logs and the lovely time we're going to have sawing them up this afternoon. Here's your house, isn't it, Hubert? You going in? Goodbye, Hubert." The outlaws turned and walked back down the lane. "I bet it'll be all right," said William. "They'll want to do another trick on us, because of thinking that yesterday's didn't come off. Let's wait about 1/4 of an hour, and then I'll go and look." In about 1/4 of an hour, William crept back to the garden and peeped in at the woodshed window. Hubert and his friends were there, sawing up the logs. William rejoined the outlaws. "It's all right," he called out joyously. "We can go fishing all day.